सभी मित्रों को नमस्कार। आप सभी लोग इतने प्यार से और इतने समय तक इस पूरी सीरीज को सुन रहे हैं, आप सभी लोगों का धन्यवाद। और मित्रों, हम सबके प्रिय और भारत के एक महान फिल्मकार श्याम बेनेगल जी के जन्मदिन पर यह डेडिकेटेड सीरीज शुरू हुई थी और आप सब लोग एक के बाद एक वक्ताओं को सुनते रहे। आज 31 दिसंबर है और आज हम लोग विधिवत इस सीरीज को यहाँ पर समाप्त करेंगे। हालांकि श्याम बेनेगल जी पर जितनी बातचीत की जाए वह कम है, मगर फिर भी कहीं न कहीं एक एकाग्र को रोकना होता है, तो फिलहाल के लिए हम इसे यहीं पर रोकेंगे। हम सभी मित्रों की ओर से श्याम बाबू, आपका हार्दिक स्वागत और एक बार पुनः आपको जन्म दिवस की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं, क्योंकि उद्देश्य तो वही था कि आपके जन्मदिन को हम लोग कुछ लंबे समय तक उसको सेलिब्रेट कर सके। 14 दिसंबर से लेकर 31 दिसंबर तक कुल 18 दिनों तक हम लोग आपके ही रंग में रंग गए, हम सभी श्याममय हो गए। जी मित्रों, हम लोग अधिक से अधिक श्याम बाबू को सुनेंगे और लाभान्वित होंगे। इन्हें जितना सुने, जितनी बार सुने, उतना कम ही लगता है, क्योंकि एक के बाद एक बेहतरीन फिल्मों के निर्माता और शानदार टीवी शोज, धारावाहिकों के निर्माता निर्देशक श्याम बेनेगल जी को तो पूरी दुनिया ही अधिक से अधिक सुनना चाहती है और अधिक से अधिक जो है हम इन पर अपने आप को कहीं न कहीं एक भरोसे के रूप में रखकर चलते हैं। श्याम बेनेगल लगातार अपने प्रारंभिक जीवन से ही सक्रिय रहे, कॉपी राइटिंग से लेकर एडवर्टाइजिंग की दुनिया में, और फिर फिल्मों की ओर आए तो फिर कैसी कैसी फिल्में दी हैं हम सभी जानते हैं। और फिर टीवी शोज में भारत की खोज, यात्रा, अमरावती की कथाएं, संविधान जैसे महत्वपूर्ण काम श्याम बाबू के निर्देशन में और इनके मार्ग निर्देशन में हो सके। इस कड़ी में जो लोग आए हैं, मैं एक बार उनके नाम ले लूं। श्याम बाबू, जो लोग शुरू से आए, 14 दिसंबर से लेकर कल तक जो लोग आए हैं उनके नाम लेता हूं। रवि झाकल जी, यशपाल शर्मा जी, सतीश शर्मा जी, रघुवीर यादव जी, राजेश्वरी सचदेव जी, सुनील शानवाग जी, शांतनु मोइत्रा जी, अशोक मिश्र जी, पिया बेनेगल जी, विनोद भारद्वाज जी, सलीम आरिफ जी, संजय धारणकर जी, असीम सिन्हा जी, चरण सलूजा जी, श्याम रावत जी, सवा जैदी जी, राहुल सिंह, राहुल चंद्रावरकर जी, दयाल निहलानी जी, हिमानी शिवपुरी जी और शमा जैदी जी। और आज हम सब के प्रिय और महबूब फिल्म निर्देशक स्वयं श्याम बेनेगल जी उपस्थित हैं, जिन्हें हम सभी लोग प्यार से, आदर से श्याम बाबू कहते हैं। तो यह एक खास अवसर है हम सभी लोगों के लिए। श्याम बाबू, तो क्यों नहीं इस खास अवसर पर हम लोग बिल्कुल आपके बचपन के दिनों में जाएं। 10 भाई बहनों के बीच श्याम बेनेगल 6ठे नंबर पर हैं, तो उस दौर को, उस अवधि को याद करें। एक भरा पूरा परिवार, और राहुल चंद्रावरकर जी ने भी विस्तार से, जो आपके भांजे हुए, अपनी बात रखी और उस परिवार के उस परिवेश को चित्रित किया। तो कुछ हम लोग भी आपसे ही सुनना चाहेंगे, उस समृद्ध विरासत को, उस परिवार की उस पृष्ठभूमि को, और एक नटखट या कहिए शुरू से ही फिल्मों के शौकीन श्याम बेनेगल को। जी स्वागत।
मैं अंग्रेजी में बोलूंगा अगर आपको
जी
इतराज ना हो।
जी
क्योंकि
बिल्कुल।
मतलब हिंदी उर्दू मैं वैसे बोलता हूँ, लेकिन आदत नहीं होने की वजह से अभी प्रॉब्लम होता है, तो मैं अंग्रेजी में
जी
बोलूंगा।
जी स्वागत।
But see, I grew up in a family, as you well know. My father was a photographer, and and he was also an amateur painter. He was an artist. So there was a certain kind of atmosphere of of an artistic nature in the family. And this was actually a wonderful atmosphere that created around our household because of the arts, the presence of arts there. And there was always something or the other, either by way of painting, drawing. My eldest brother was an artist. He lived in Calcutta. And then my second brother was a photographer, and so on. So there was always around us a sense of arts of one kind or another. Except for music, of course, none of us were capable of learning, nor did we have too much music, but we used to listen to a great deal of music. And but I had, from a very young age, I wanted to listen to music, both classical Indian and classical Western. So I had the opportunity because one of our distant neighbors happened to have a huge collection of classical Western music, and which I used to go in the afternoon when I went to school. During school hours, like say for instance after lunch, if I had half an hour, 45 minutes before I went back to class, I would go to his home and listen to some music. And so I got very acquainted with classical Western music, it, because he had a huge, wonderful collection of it. So one thing after another, it meant that my interest in the arts would be kept alive. Now this was in many ways very useful to me. And then I had uh, an uncle of mine who had come, when I was small. He'd come from Burma, during the Second World War, and he had a great deal of interest in the cinema as well as in literature. And because of that, we would always have a collection of books, and he would buy books and he would read them, and then of course, they would be lying around, which I would start reading. So one thing after another led to the fact that my interest both in literature increased, and of course, because of the atmosphere at home, there was always the sense of the arts uh, continuing like that. And so that's so my childhood, in fact, was in many ways a wonderful training ground for me to develop ideas that I could probably do something in the arts. But of course, there was no way that one could have made a livelihood as an artist, as a painter, because you'd have to live a life of, a lot of poverty and so on, unless you become a very famous artist. So that was that was the situation. So I went to school and I did my college and so on, hoping that some stage by having a degree or a master's degree, I could at least be a teacher or a lecturer in a college. So that was the whole thing. There weren't that many opportunities at that time when I was growing up. So that was one of the things. And but my secret ambition was to be a filmmaker, and that ambition developed because I could see one of my cousins, my second cousin of mine, Gurudat, who was already a very successful filmmaker in Bombay. And because he was a successful filmmaker, I felt, although I grew up in a cantonment town in Hyderabad, where thinking, even imagining that you would be in films would have been a ridiculous notion. But then my ambition to be a filmmaker came because of Gurudat. And Gurudat was was already a very successful filmmaker, and and because of that, I felt that I will finish my school and college and probably go directly to Bombay, and hoping that I would be an assistant of his or something like that, and uh, start my career in films. But that was not to be, because Gurdat already had many assistants and so on. And so and he had himself discouraged me, saying that it's pointless you're trying to get into films like this, because from a third assistant, what will you do? Because you will be stuck as an assistant. The best way for you is to start making films. And the only way I could start making films was when I came to Bombay, I joined advertising, an advertising agency. And fortunately, that advertising agency was Lintas. And Lintas used to produce the largest number of advertising films at that time. And because of that, I joined as a copywriter, but I became a kind of scriptwriter on advertising films, as assisting a very well-known Bombay personality, Alec Padamsee, who was the head of the department of films there. And Alec Padamsee was, as you know, ran a very successful theatre group, and also was a very well-known theatre director. And so that gave me another opportunity. First of all, was that I could understand, learn a great deal about construction, in dramatic narratives, all of that kind of thing. And so all these things were learning opportunities that came my way. And this was a very, very, I mean, when I think back, I think that it's strange, that I should have had so many different kinds of opportunities, because for a lot of people, they would have imagined that what I was doing had no opportunities to learn my craft, but actually I did, largely because of these opportunities. And and in Lintas, because we were making advertising films, I would make a very large number of them. About Alec Padamsee, because he was doing a lot of theatre, he would allow me to make the advertising films for the agency. And so I would end up by making maybe 100 films in a year. So, that gave me the opportunity to learn the craft of filmmaking in a way that nobody who goes to a film school can possibly have. All of this was really what helped me to become a filmmaker without having to be an assistant to anybody. So this, I would think, was probably the greatest advantage I ever had. And what else is there to say? I mean, except for the fact that, it was very difficult for me to get money to make a feature film, simply because the kind of films I wanted to make, there was no market for those kind of films at that time. And it was because of, the one of our clients meaning a supplier, a man who would, who had an advertising film distribution company, and that company was called Blaze. And because of Blaze, and because of the people who ran Blaze, I got my opportunity to make my first feature film. And of course, the amount of money that he had, this is a gentleman called Mohan Bijlani. He said, I've got very little money, but which I'm willing to lose. So he gave me that little bit of money. And with that, I made my first film, Ankur. And it was a very small sum of money, actually, when you think of it. It was no more than about 5.5 lakhs of rupees. But the fact is that we made a film in that kind of money with a little bit of help because of the sales and distribution and so on and so forth. So that, and the film became unexpectedly quite successful. And because of that success, I think I remained a filmmaker from then to now. So I don't know how it is in life for everybody, but certainly for me, it's been an incredible adventure of this kind. But the main thing for me, I think, is because I followed what to me was something I wanted to do in life. It wasn't something that I I may have blundered into it, but believe me, if you do not have a focused attention on what you wish to do in life, you will wander about without any particular direction, and that's a bit sad. But in my case, fortunately for me, I found cinema, and in cinema, I also found means by which I could become a filmmaker myself. Now, those were advantages that I did enjoy. I cannot say that everybody has that advantage, but there is something to be said that if you are absolutely focused on what you wish to do, it will happen. Now, that's basically what I have to say to you. And I don't know what else you would like me to discuss, because there are a whole lot of questions that have been given to me. So would you like to ask me those questions?
जी, श्याम बाबू, अभी आपने गुरुदत्त की बात की। आपकी दादी और गुरुदत्त जी की नानी दोनों बहनें हैं जिसकी चर्चा हुई, और आपने भी इस बात को स्वीकारा कि किस तरह गुरुदत्त के फिल्म निर्माण से आप भी प्रभावित हुए और आप इस फील्ड में आना चाहे। पूर्व में हम लोगों ने सत्यजीत रे पर आपके विचार जाने हैं, आपने उन पर फिल्म भी बनाई है, इससे भी अवगत हैं। गुरुदत्त की फिल्में भी अपने हिसाब से क्लासिक फिल्में हैं और उन फिल्मों को पसंद करने वालों की एक बड़ी संख्या है। गुरुदत्त की उन फिल्मों के बारे में आपके क्या विचार हैं?
अब देखिए, अभी मैं जब सोचता हूँ, he was very much within the conventions of cinema. मतलब he made conventional films, जिसमें अपने हिंदुस्तानी फिल्म्स जो है, मतलब इंडियन फिल्म्स जनरली जो दिखाए जाते हैं, those films have a very particular kind of form, and that particular form is very distinct to India, because these are not the kind of films that are made, let us say, either in America or in Europe or even the Far East, in Japan, and so on and so forth, which is very typical of India. And that is our traditional film form. And this actually, it was an inheritance from the theater, urban theater of the late 19th century. Because the kind of films we make, today, of course, it's all changed, but the fact is that certainly in the history of Indian cinema, if you look at films all the way from the time it was invented until the late 1960s or early 1970s, Indian films generally were films that told a story and they were seen as kind of complete entertainments, which meant that not only were you telling a story through film, but you were also getting people to enjoy other aspects. Like, say, for instance, films would have songs. Whether there were need for songs or not was not the question. The fact was that they did have songs. Each film used to have about 5 or 6 songs minimum, and a music director was a very important figure in the area of filmmaking, because that music director happened to be somebody who helped you sell your film because of the kind of music that he gave to you. And the lyricists and the poets who wrote those lyrics were also very important people. So you see, we developed a whole business of very fine poets in Urdu and Hindi who started to write lyrics for films. And then we had these songs that were composed by music directors, wonderful songs and all of that, but that was an art in itself. So I always felt that when I was a filmmaker, as a filmmaker, that am I making a film to suit the songs, or am I making a film to make a film? The songs and so on and so forth, if I were to use them, was actually in conjunction with what I required in the film, not the other way around. Often, what used to happen was in the commercial business that it was the music director often who determined the kind of film you would make and the amount of money you were likely to get to make the film. That's a very unusual and very strange kind of situation, because this is not how it was anywhere else in the world except in our subcontinent, which is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Now, the in an atmosphere like that, to make the kind of films I wanted to make, it was not the easiest thing in the world. It was very difficult because I didn't want to be sort of create what one might call a product on the basis of the fact that I have so and so as a music director, so and so as a lyric writer, so and so as the star of the film, etc., etc. Put them together into a film. That was not my idea of a film. My idea of a film was like when somebody writes a novel or somebody writes a poem even. It has nothing to do with characters. Different elements being put together in this fashion. So this was the whole point of it. So when I started making films, I said the most important thing is the film, not who is. It's not the lyrics, or the poem, or the songs and so on and so forth, but it's the film, the narrative of the film. It's the content of the film that's more important, and all the frills and everything that go along with it. So this was the whole purpose. So and this whole kind of movement in the cinema actually started with Satyajit Ray in the 1950s, and it became kind of norm in regional cinemas of the country. But in Hindi, it hadn't happened. And so by the time I came in, which was in the early 1970s, when I made Ankur, for instance, which had no songs at all in it, it was very unusual. But fortunately, because I had a producer who was also a distributor, we managed to get the film distributed and shown to our audience. And because of that, a partnership began, in the sense that I made my next 3-4 films with the same producer, that is Blaze, and because they had a distribution thing going, it was possible for my films to be released, although they were very, very different from the kind of films that were being made at that time. So you see, it's a yeah. So anyway, maybe you have some more questions to ask. I'm not quite sure.
जी, और साथियों, अंकुर की बात हुई, श्याम बेनेगल जी की पहली फिल्म की बात हुई, और पहली ही फिल्म में लंदन से और यूरोप के अन्य जगहों से कई डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स आपको मिले, और पहली ही फिल्म जो है इतनी उसकी चर्चा हुई। तो ऐसे कई, आपकी बात में कई और फिल्में हैं जिसके डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स भारत में और भारत के बाहर भी, यूरोप में और अन्य जगहों पर काफी संख्या में रहे। तो उस अनुभव, वह एक खास अनुभव था। वह आपसे पहले इतना आसान नहीं रहा था कि डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर्स यूरोप में और अन्य जगहों पर इतनी आसानी से और इतनी कंटिन्यूअस रूप में हमें मिलते रहे। तो इस अनुभव के बारे में भी कुछ बातचीत करें। जी।
See, the thing about any creative work that you do, the most important thing is it's always the first time. It doesn't matter that you have been in the business for 25, 30, 40, 50 years. But every time you make a film, it's like you're making your first film. And the experiences related to that are exactly like what you had when you were making your first film. So this is one of the things about filmmaking. In fact, it is both the positive side of it as well as the negative side of it. But positive simply because every time you make a film, it's the first film you've ever made. Although it may be 35th film or 40th film of which you have been making, but every time you make a film, it's your first film. And unless you think like that, I don't think you will do anything worthwhile creatively.
जी मित्रों, हम लोग श्याम बाबू को एक बार पुनः उनके बचपन में ले चलते हैं, उनके हैदराबाद शहर से उन्हें जोड़ते हैं जहां वे पले बढ़े, और बाद में हम उनकी कई फिल्मों की शूटिंग वहां देखते हैं। हैदराबाद और उसके आसपास के इलाकों में कई फिल्मों की शूटिंग हुई है। पहली फिल्म भी उसी परिवेश में बनी हुई है। दक्कनी हिंदी का हम प्रयोग भी उस फिल्म में देखते हैं। कहानी भी उसी इलाके की है। हालांकि वह कहानी उस इलाके की होकर भी एक पूरे देश में जो जिस तरह की समस्याएं थी, सामंतवाद की समस्याएं, छुआछूत की समस्याएं, जातिगत भेदभाव की समस्याएं, वह सब समस्याएं पूरी गंभीरता के साथ उस फिल्म में भी उभरी हैं। बाद में कई और फिल्मों में श्याम बाबू ने इशू बेस्ड सिनेमा का निर्माण किया है। तो जब आप हैदराबाद और उसके आसपास के परिवेश से आप भली भांति परिचित हैं और बाद में आप बॉम्बे आते हैं, मुंबई आते हैं, और वहां भी आपका घर, आपका ऑफिस, आपकी कर्मभूमि बनती है बॉम्बे। जब इन दो शहरों को आप बेहद करीब से जानते हैं, पूरे देश दुनिया आप घूमे हुए हैं, तो इन दो शहरों की अगर हम बात करें खास तौर से आपकी जन्मभूमि और आपकी कर्मभूमि, तो हैदराबाद और उसकी सराउंडिंग, उसके सबअर्ब्स, और मुंबई और उसकी सराउंडिंग्स, उसके सबअर्ब्स, इन दोनों में अगर कुछ तुलना करना हो और आप स्वयं इन दोनों शहरों से आप अपने आप को जोड़कर देखते हैं आज की तारीख में, तो क्या पाते हैं, कैसा लगता है? जी
When it comes to Hyderabad, the whole Deccan Plateau, which I feel is very much mine, because I feel at home the moment I move on to the Deccan Plateau. You know, the moment I leave the city of Mumbai and start from Pune, you know, where you climb up on the plateau. You know, Mumbai is on the coast, but then you climb up on the plateau in Pune. And from then on, you are on the tableland of India, you know, which I feel very, very at home with, because I grew up in that whole area. You see, because it's both, you know, in the old days, the state of Hyderabad, that is Nizam state of Hyderabad, that used to consist of three parts. One was the Marathwada part, then the Telangana part, and the Karnataka part. There were these three parts. Now, all those three parts were on the plateau of India, you know, on the Deccan Plateau.
जी
Now, so the moment I get onto the plateau, for me, it's familiar land. It's home, you know. So that's how I always saw Hyderabad. The moment when I first came to Bombay to start working here, you know, I used to miss that. I used to miss it greatly. You know, and the moment I crossed Pune and went, you know, by train across Pune, then suddenly the familiar landscape, and suddenly the whole air changed. You know, the foliage changed, trees changed, the land changed, the color of the soil changed. You know, all of this. So immediately, everything suddenly you said, "This is home. This is my home." You know, this kind of thing. But then when I moved to Mumbai permanently, for me this also became home. I mean, the entire coastline, the west coast of India, particularly, and the whole coastal parts of the country also became like home. So there was none of the difference that I used to see before. So today, for me, it's not just the Deccan Plateau, but it's in fact, in many ways, it is the entire South Asia. I mean, the entire subcontinent of India, which for me is home. I can't see of anything else as home. Because, if I go to Europe and so forth, the moment I come over the Arabian Sea to the city of Mumbai, I know that I'm home. And the same thing if I'm on the Far East, the moment I cross and come into whether it's in Chennai or Calcutta or whatever, the moment I come, I know that I've come home. So it's broadened in that sense. That today, home for me is the entire South Asian part, which means that all of India is home for me now. I don't think of just the Deccan Plateau as being my home.
जी। और मित्रों, हम देख रहे हैं कि श्याम बाबू किस तरह से हर बारीकियों को बतला रहे हैं। मिट्टी के रंग, हवा, पठार और जो भी भौगोलिक जिस तरह के परिवर्तन होते हैं, उनमें कितनी बारीकियों में जाते हैं। स्वयं भी उसको अपनी अनुभूति के स्तर पर भी, अपनी सेंसिबिलिटी में भी किस बारीकी से बात करते हैं। और यही बारीकी हम इनकी फिल्मों में भी देखते हैं। अंकुर फिल्म में भी एक से एक खूबसूरत दृश्य, वे खेत जहां पे शबाना आजमी दौड़ रही है और तमाम चीजें, या जानवर आ रहे हैं, जानवर को भगाया जा रहा है, जो खेत के जो पौधे लगे हुए हैं उसको खाने के लिए आ गए हैं। तो ऐसे बारीक दृश्यों का जो दृश्यांकन है वह भी अद्भुत है कई फिल्मों में। शुरुआत की फिल्में ले लें या बाद में भी वेलकम टू सज्जनपुर की बात करें या बिल्डन अब्बा की बात करें या और जो दूसरी फिल्में हैं, गुजरात पर आधारित मंथन फिल्म जो दुग्ध क्रांति पर आधारित फिल्म है, इन तमाम फिल्मों में हम उन बारीकियों को, अपने परिवेश को देख पाते हैं। मुंबई की बात हुई है श्याम बाबू, तो जो ज्योति स्टूडियो है जहां आपका ऑफिस रहा शुरू में, उससे मैं कई आपके इंटरव्यू सुन रहा था इस बीच, तो मैं बार बार देखता हूं कि ज्योति स्टूडियो आपके जेहन में आता है और आप जो है उसको लेकर बड़े बहुत ही गहराई से उसको याद करते हैं। वो एक बड़ा पुराना साउंड स्टूडियो है भारत का और बॉम्बे का, आलम आरा का उससे संबंध है, पृथ्वीराज कपूर उससे जुड़े हुए हैं, आप स्वयं वहां रहे हैं। आप कई बार कहते हैं कि मैं वो जो पुरानी फिल्मों के घोस्ट थे जो उनके बीच में रहा करता था और एक से एक बेहतरीन पोस्टर आप लगाए हुए थे। तो कोई बड़ा फिल्म मेकर ऐसे नहीं बनता है। आपकी फिल्मों के साथ हमें अपने भारतीय सिनेमा की, हिंदी सिनेमा की पूरी लेगेसी निकलकर आती हुई दिखती है, उससे एक जुड़ाव दिखता है। तो उस ज्योति स्टूडियो जो आपका पुराना ऑफिस रहा और आज का जो ऑफिस है, इस सवाल में हम बदलते हुए मुंबई को भी देख रहे हैं और मुंबई बदल रही है, सिनेमा बदल रहा है, फिल्मकारों के ऑफिसेज बदल रहे हैं, जहां जहां फिल्मों के केंद्र थे बॉम्बे में वे जगहें बदल रही हैं। तो इस पूरे बदलाव पर आप क्या कहेंगे और जो आपकी स्मृति जुड़ी हुई है, घनीभूत स्मृति ज्योति स्टूडियो से, उसके बारे में क्या कहेंगे? जी।
Jyoti Studios was the very first studio where the first talkie film was made, Alamara. And it was a very, very important studio because a lot of people started their careers there. As I have mentioned earlier, Prithviraj Kapoor, a whole lot of people. And that studio was very important in many ways because you see the first sound picture was made there. And then a whole lot of other films started to be made there. Before the film industry moved from South Bombay to the studios moved northwards to Andheri and places like that. But for a long time, this was the center. This was Jyoti Studio, and around there was center. And the film industry did not move beyond Dadar, because the Ranjit Studios used to be in Dadar. There were several other studios close by, not far. And so, but Jyoti Studio had a special kind of place simply because most of the film people who came to Bombay to make a career first came to Jyoti Studios
जी
to find work. So among them, as you mentioned yourself, Prithviraj Kapoor was one of them. There were several others after that, and eventually me, because I found that I made it my home. I mean, in the sense that it was my office, and I loved that office because although it was a very old and decrepit building, I should love that office for a simple reason, because this is where all the ghosts of the past were. The entire film industry, you could feel the sense of the entire development of the Indian film industry, Hindi film industry particularly, was the development of that in that particular studio. And in fact, when I had to leave that studio because they wouldn't extend the lease, so we had to move, and I moved to my present office, which is in Tardeo, which is not far from there, of course. But I felt very sad leaving that place, because there I was living with what I thought and felt was the true heart film industry of India. That is where it started. That is where it continued to grow. And so I was living with all of that, which I just loved. The idea that I was with what one might call the entire Hindi Urdu film industry of the country. So that was basically what it was, and it remained my office for many years. It's only in the 1970s, late 1970s, that I had to move out of there. But for a long time, from the time I gave up advertising, that is from the middle 1960s into late 1970s, that was my office. And that's where my first few films were made. I mean, whether it's Ankur, Nishant, Manthan, Bhumika, Mandi, all the way up to that Mandi, I was making those films from there. And it's only after that I moved here, where I am at the present moment, which is my office.
जी मित्रों, हम लोग इस बातचीत को आगे बढ़ाते हैं और कुछ और सवाल श्याम बाबू से। एक सवाल जो मुझे मुझे यह सवाल खास तौर से पूछने की जरूरत महसूस हो रही है, मैं वह सवाल श्याम बाबू से पूछ रहा हूं। वह सवाल यह है कि आपने काफी हद तक, एक सीमा तक, शबाना आजमी हो, नसरुद्दीन शाह हो, ओमपुरी जो अब नहीं रहे, रजित कपूर हो, इन कलाकारों को समानांतर रूप से एक स्टार की जैसी स्थिति प्रदान की, और इससे उन्हें कई दूसरी तरह की फिल्मों में काम करने का मौका मिला और रास्ते निकले, जो अच्छी बात है, स्वागत योग्य है। लेकिन जब भी आपने कोई और फिल्म बनाई, आप लगातार कितनी सारी फिल्में बनाए हैं, उन बहुत महत्वपूर्ण फिल्मों को बनाने वाले फिल्मकारों में से आप एक हैं। बाद में ये कलाकार आपके साथ जुड़े हुए रहे, जब जब आपने उन्हें याद किया यथासंभव वे जुड़े। कल परसों दयाल निहलानी जी भी इस बात को रख रहे थे कि जब कैसे वे 3 धारावाहिकों में व्यस्त थे और आपने जब उन्हें याद किया तो उन्होंने समय निकाला। और गोविंद निहलानी जी ने भी पूछा कि क्या तुम समय निकाल रहे हो, तो दयाल जी कहते हैं कि हाँ, मैं अपने गुरु के लिए, अपने भाग्य विधाता के लिए समय निकालूंगा, और निकालते हैं। ऐसे ही कई लोगों की कहानियों को हम इस एकाग्र में भी सुन पाए हैं। तो यह श्याम बाबू, मेरा सवाल यह है कि यह जो बिल्कुल शुरू से चले और बाद में कई फिल्मों तक कितने सारे कलाकार, बड़े कलाकार या कम रोल करने वाले कलाकार भी आपके साथ जुड़े रहे, यह संबंध, यह रिलेशनशिप डायरेक्टर एक्टर्स का, डायरेक्टर टेक्नीशियंस का आपका दशकों तक बना हुआ है, कई डेकेड्स तक वह संबंध चला आ रहा है। आज यह सवाल मुझे लगता है इसलिए भी कुछ उपयोगी है या जरूरी है कि आज की जो पीढ़ी है या आपके बाद की कुछ पीढ़ियां, उनमें संबंधों का इस तरह से सस्टेन कर पाना हम नहीं देख पा रहे हैं, चाहे फिल्म इंडस्ट्री हो या दूसरी और इंडस्ट्रीज है या अपना हमारा पारिवारिक जीवन ही हो। उस तरह से हमारे रिलेशनशिप की बॉन्डिंग उस तरह की नहीं है जैसी आपकी है या आपके जो और लोग जुड़े हुए हैं आपसे, उन लोगों की है। तो इस तरह के संबंधों का जो निर्वहन है, इसको हम कैसे बचाकर रखें, कैसे इसे हम डेवलप करें, हम अपने रिलेशनशिप को एक लॉन्ग रन तक ले चले, और आप स्वयं कैसे इसको इतने संभालते आए हैं, इस पर भी कुछ कहें तो यह आपका उत्तर उपयोगी होगा हम सबके लिए। जी।
Well, basically, it's a sense of I saw myself as a part of a repertory, as a repertory company, because all the actors who've been working with me, and I've always been concerned, always been interested in seeing that as much as possible, I should make use of these actors, because these actors are absolutely highly talented, very talented people. And if I can afford them, I will continue to work with them. So it's a question of, you see, these actors who've been working with me for over a long period of time. As much as possible, I try and get them to work with me, whatever film I might be making. But it all depends whether there are parts for them or not. But by and large, I have found that I've managed to have a repertory of actors who are outstanding actors in the field, and they have worked with me for very, in fact, in many cases, for very little money, compared to what their real worth in the market might be. And that, of course, I consider myself very fortunate, because at least I've managed to interest them in the kind of work they're doing. The important thing for me is that when I put an actor in my film, I would like to see them, to flower. I want them to bring the best that they have to offer in whatever part they do play. Whether it is a small part, big part, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is you have to see the essential art of the person in the film that you are making. And so my casting usually is based on the fact that their ability, and to bring out the best of their talent in whatever they're doing. And this is why, many of these actors have remained with me for a long time, from the very beginning, because I really am not interested in creating stars. I'm really interested in seeing that they remain outstanding actors and probably the best in their field. Now that is important to me. And I try as much as possible that when I'm casting, to see that what I offer to them is something that not only suits them, but will bring the best out of them. And obviously, for that reason alone, I've had this whole repertory of actors who have worked with me for a very long period of time. But when I can't take them, then I feel very bad. But what can I do? Because you have to take take the actors who are specifically required for that particular film. But by and large, over a period of time, I found that I've managed to, work with a good bunch of actors who are in many ways like part of a repertory. And that, makes a huge difference, because you don't need to explain too much to them. They fit in very beautifully. without any kind of additional, you know, having to constantly, what one might call, constantly direct them and tell them do this, do that, that sort of thing. They fall into place. It's perfect. I don't necessarily have to go on briefing them for hours and hours before they do what they're doing. So it's a marvelous way to work, because I find that the concept of a repertory is very important.
जी। और मित्रों, हम देख रहे हैं कि एक अनुभव सिद्ध व्यक्ति, वेल एक्सपीरियंस्ड व्यक्ति, और हम सभी में से कई लोगों के मार्ग निर्देशक और भाग्य विधाता जैसे शब्द भी आपके लिए आते हैं, यह आसान नहीं है। और वे लोग जो स्वतंत्र रूप से भी काम कर रहे हैं, इंडिपेंडेंट भी काम कर रहे हैं, आपके साथ भी काम कर रहे हैं। और ऐसा नहीं कि आपको वो खुश करने के लिए कह रहे हैं, नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं। वे कहीं ना कहीं इस तरह की भावना आपके प्रति रखते हैं। तमाम लोग जुड़े हुए हैं, कई प्रतिक्रियाएं मिल रही हैं। मैं एक प्रतिक्रिया यहाँ पर ले रहा हूं रमेश गोस्वामी जी की, जो भारत के ही हैं, लेखक हैं, लेखक बिरादरी से जुड़े हुए हैं और इन दिनों साउथ अफ्रीका में हैं। रमेश गोस्वामी जी लिख रहे हैं, दिस इज अ ग्रेट मोमेंट फॉर दोज हु एडमायर मिस्टर बेनेगल एंड हिज सुप्रीम सिनेमैटिक क्रिएशंस। सिनेमैटिक क्रिएशन की बात हुई तो इस पर एक और सवाल मैं आपसे पूछना चाह रहा हूं कि आपने अपना एक खास तरह का सिनेमैटिक ग्रामर विकसित किया है, और एडवर्टीजमेंट, फिल्म और टीवी शोज, इन सब के माध्यम से आपने अपना एक खास इकोसिस्टम भी विकसित किया है इस बीच। हालांकि आपके पास, श्याम बाबू, पीछे मुड़ने के लिए समय नहीं है। पीछे आप कम ही देखते हैं, आप निरंतर आगे बढ़ने में यकीन रखते हैं। फिर भी जब कभी पीछे मुड़कर देखते हैं तो इस इकोसिस्टम को लेकर जो आपने विकसित किया है, कई ऐसी कहानियां हमने इस डेडिकेटेड सीरीज में जानी कि कोई छोटी छोटी बातें, किसी ड्राइवर को लेकर, किसी और चीज को लेकर, कोई मान लिया कोई गाड़ी आपकी बिक गई थी, उसका ड्राइवर खाली था, फिर भी आप उसे रखे रहे ऑफिस में। ऐसे कई प्रसंग आए। तो एक खास तरह का इकोसिस्टम आपने जो है विकसित किया है, जब इसके बारे में सोचते हैं तो क्या पाते हैं, और जब पीछे पलटकर अपने ही काम को देखते हैं, 70 के दशक से या कुछ उससे पहले से ही आप सक्रिय हैं, आपकी फिल्में आनी शुरू हो जाती हैं, तब क्या देखते हैं, और क्या पीछे पलटकर देखने के लिए आपको समय मिलता है, और क्या कभी कोई आत्मकथा आप लिखेंगे?
नहीं, वो तो बिल्कुल नहीं करूंगा, क्योंकि कोई it's not possible. I cannot be. It's too narcissistic. मतलब, I'm not too fond of looking at myself in the mirror. So it's more important that you look outward, but inward you only look in order that you are being honest to yourself. Beyond that, you don't look inward, and it's not a question of self-love. So I'm not fond of looking at myself in the mirror all the time. That's not important. What is important is that whatever you want to do, you have to do it in many ways. I mean, it might sound rather ridiculous, but you have to do it not with a selfish motive, because that will happen anyway. What you have to get, you will get. But you should not have a selfish motive in doing that. Your motive should essentially be one, that whatever work that you wish to do should be done to the best of your ability and with the greatest amount of honesty. That's very important. And that's, it may not always be possible, but you have to make it so. You see, so ultimately, at my age, the age that I have come to, it's not important for me that I should earn a lot of money or make money. That's not, but that's never been my ambition from the very beginning. It was always my ambition to make good films, because that's the only thing I can do. Make good films, make films that satisfy me, my friends, the people around me as much as possible. And to be most and more important than anything else, to be honest to myself. That I think is the most important.
जी
जी
श्याम बाबू, आपके साथ काम करने वाले कई कलाकार भी जुड़े हुए हैं। रवि झांकल जी, यशपाल शर्मा जी, कनाडा से चरण सलूजा जी, तमाम लोग जुड़े हुए हैं। एक सवाल रवि झांकल जी का है कि सर, सुना है आपने अपनी पहली फिल्म अंकुर बनाने के लिए 11 साल वेट किया।
सही बात है, it is true. It took me a long time before I could make my first feature film. Although I was making advertising films for a long time, but it took me a long time before I could actually make my first feature film. You see, because I started my career in 1958 and wanting to make a feature film, but I made my first feature film in 1973. You know, so it was 15 years that passed in my career before I made my first feature film. So naturally, you know, it's more important that when you make your feature, you are absolutely ready to make it. So in that sense, I think it was important for me to have had that apprenticeship, you know, because I always used to, you know, be envious of people who made their first feature film when they were about 24 years of age, 25 years of age. For instance, I mean, one of the things was I used to see, I mean, Guru Dutt, for instance, had made his first film when he was in his 20s. And here I had not made a feature film until much later, and in my second half of the 1930s, I mean, the 30s, you know, I must have been about 37 or so when I made my first feature film. Now, that's very quite late in many ways, you know, because most people would have made them when they were still in their 1920s. But when I made my first feature film, everybody thought I was making my first film. I was not making my first film. I was making my first feature film, because I'd already made documentaries, I'd already made so many advertising films and so on and so forth. So there was always a whole bunch of training that I had been through, of course, self-trained, but however, that training was there. So when I made my first feature film, everybody used to say, my God, he's made his first feature film and it's already won this award, that award, etc., and so on. But they didn't realize that that was not my first film. It was only my first feature film.
जी, more than 1,000 films you have made earlier, before the Ankur released. Yeah, you made.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
जी, चरण सलूजा जी फ्रॉम कनाडा लिख रहे हैं, जुड़े हुए हैं, वहां से देख रहे हैं इस कार्यक्रम को। फॉर्चुनेट टू हैव वर्क विद यू श्याम बाबू, एक्साइटेड टू बी वाचिंग विद यू लाइव, माय बेस्ट विशेस सर। दिस इज चरण सलूजा फ्रॉम जी।
Hi Charan, how are you doing? Haven't seen you in a long time.
Always admired your love for food.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
जी, हम मित्रों अपने सवाल को आगे बढ़ाते हैं। श्याम बाबू, आपने कई किताबों पर और साहित्यिक कृतियों पर धारावाहिक बनाए हैं, फिल्में बनाई हैं। जो पूरी आपकी ट्रायोलॉजी है वह भी हम जानते हैं, मम्मो, सरदारी बेगम और एक जुबैदा, यस जी। इसी तरह से जो भारत एक खोज धारावाहिक जो इतना लोकप्रिय हुआ, हमारे देश के पहले प्रधानमंत्री नेहरू जी की किताब डिस्कवरी ऑफ इंडिया पर आधारित है, उसमें भी आपने अपनी ओर से भी कई चीजें जोड़ी हैं। सूरज का सातवां घोड़ा धर्मवीर भारती के उपन्यास पर आधारित है, और इसी तरह जुनून रस्किन बॉन्ड का जो नोवेला है द फ्लाइट ऑफ पिजन्स, उस पर आधारित है। सवाल यह है कि आप इन विभिन्न और भी ऐसे कई उदाहरण दिए जा सकते हैं। आपके साथ गिरीश कर्नाड जुड़े हुए हैं, शमा जैदी, तमाम लोग जो कहीं ना कहीं राइटिंग से भी जुड़े हुए लोग हैं। गिरीश कर्नाड स्वयं एक बड़े नाटककार रहे, आपके साथ स्क्रीन प्ले भी साझा किया, आपकी फिल्मों में भी रहे, और खासतौर से मंथन फिल्म में उनकी भूमिका बहुत जबरदस्त रही। जब आप किसी साहित्यिक कृति पर या किसी किताब पर कुछ बनाने के लिए सोचते हैं, या संविधान को भी हम ले सकते हैं, आपने कितनी सारी किताबें, हजारों हजार पृष्ठ आप लोगों ने और आपकी पूरी टीम ने पढ़ी है, और उस पर संविधान के 10 एपिसोड बने हैं। तो जब किसी साहित्यिक कृति को, किसी टेक्स्ट को लेते हैं, उस पर बनाते हैं फिल्म, तो क्या उसमें पहली बात ऐसी क्या कौंधती है कि आप उस पर फिल्म या टीवी शो करने के लिए सोचते हैं? जी।
Well, you see, the most important thing, of course, is that there has to be something worthwhile, something that is useful, not only for oneself, maybe for people around you. The important thing is that when you make a film, it's not just a question of making film for someone else. You're making that film as a learning experience for yourself. That is the first thing that happens. Because every time you make a film, you are in fact learning something from it. And that is the process. So whenever I've made, whatever film I have made, constantly has been something to learn for myself. It's important that I learn, I have the experience of this, that like if I take any works of literature like I have taken to make films, but it will be the understanding of that author's work becomes much deeper when you actually try to make a film out of it. Because then you are going into it at a depth which you would otherwise not do if you were just sitting and reading it. So this also makes a lot of difference. So I have used a lot of literary work that I have used to make films, but often some of them have been original, but many of them have been based on other people's work. But you see, but the whole idea is that the experience of reading a book is one thing. The wanting to make a film is another thing, because when you're making a film, you're moving from one particular medium to another medium. And if you are transforming, say, you have the literary medium on which a book is written. Now, from that literary medium, you are moving on to what is a completely different medium and uses a completely different kind of language and uses a completely different kind of medium. So it's a transformation. It's really not a translation, nor is it a copy. So when you use any material, written material, to make a film, what you are actually doing is transforming that into another medium. And that itself is a very important thing without the experience of that literary work being destroyed. But it's very difficult, it's not always easy, because when you actually, if you look at a writer, when he writes a book and then you make a film from it, the writer who wrote the book would never be happy with what you have done, because obviously in his mind, what he saw when he wrote the book would be obviously different from what I have done. Clearly, two different kinds of things. So it is not really it's not simply a translation or even a simple interpretation. It's much more than that. It's a whole transformation, because it's a transformation from one medium to another medium. So that's the whole process.
कुछ अब आपके जो कई और दूसरे पक्ष हैं उसकी ओर बढ़ते हैं। मसलन आप 2 बार, जहां तक मुझे ध्यान है, जहां तक मेरी जानकारी है, अलग अलग समय में आप 2 बार कुछ अवधि के लिए, कुछ एक वर्षों के लिए FTII पुणे में पढ़ाने का भी आपने काम किया। और हालांकि आप अपनी फिल्मों से और अपने टीवी शोज से हम सभी को पहले ही इंटरटेन भी करते रहे हैं, एजुकेट भी करते रहे, पूरी पीढ़ी को, हमसे और हमसे पहले की भी पीढ़ी को। फिर भी जो FTII पुणे में आपका बतौर अध्यापक जो अनुभव रहा, उसके बारे में क्या सोचते हैं, कुछ कहें।
देखिए, I was never a principal of the FTII. I was never a principal. I didn't really do any kind of academic teaching at the FTII. I was the chairman of the council that ran FTII. So it was essentially the job of looking at how the institutional functioning and whether it was, whatever the methodology that they were using to teach and to teach the students, whether that was working out well or not. Now that's a completely different thing from actually going there and teaching. I didn't do that because I was never a principal of that institution. I was never a director of that institution. I was a chairman of the group of people who were actually looking at the functioning of the FTII. Although I did occasionally speak to students on different subjects over the years, but I was never a teacher there. So the person who was actually running the institution as a principal was Girish Karnad, not me. Girish actually was running that institution, physically running it, and he was staying there. He was the head of the institution. He was the director of the institution. But I was never that. I was only the chairman of the board. So you see, so we were concerned with policy, methodology, setting out the courses, different kinds of courses, the direction course, acting course, writing courses, and so on and so forth, different kinds of things, and the requirements of the institution to be very effective. So basically, that was my work. So it was also to coordinate between the ministry, that was because it comes under the Information Broadcasting Ministry, and the institution itself. So functioning as a bridge between the two.
और जब FTII की बात हुई है श्याम बाबू, तो हम NSD की भी बात करें। पुणे से हम दिल्ली की ओर चले, नई दिल्ली की ओर चले, जहां NSD है, और जहां उस NSD से जुड़े हुए तमाम कलाकार, कई पीढ़ियों के कलाकार, इला अरुण जी, हिमानी शिवपुरी, अशोक मिश्र, रवि झांकल, यशपाल शर्मा, तमाम ऐसे लोग हैं जो वहां से आए हुए हैं और जो आपके साथ काम करते हैं, नीना गुप्ता और तमाम लोग। तो NSD के कलाकारों के प्रति किस तरह का आपके अंदर भाव रहा, या उस वहां से आए हुए लोगों को लेकर आप किस तरह से सोचते हैं NSD के काम को लेकर? जी
Sorry.
जी
The NSD has produced excellent actors, outstanding actors.
जी
And for me, a trained actor is a boon. It's actually a wonderful pleasure to work with trained actors. And the NSD produced outstanding actors. Particularly from the time of Alkazi and later, they set the training in such wonderful ways that they produced outstanding actors, one after the other. And I found that using NSD actors, there was a lot of my work was done very easily because they're outstanding. They understand what they're doing. They are trained. They're articulate. They use the language well. They speak their lines well. All of these things are there, and mime, the work in mime, and the manner in which they move, all these wonderful things that you are required to be an outstanding actor, all of that training is given there at National School of Drama, which is one of the reasons why I used actor after actor from the National School of Drama over a period of time. And in fact, many of them became, in many ways, a large part of the repertory of actors that I was using in my films.
जी, और यहाँ पर मैं एक प्रतिक्रिया और ले रहा हूं रमेश गोस्वामी जी की। वे लिख रहे हैं, प्लीज अलाउ मी टू एक्सप्रेस माय ग्रेट एडमिरेशन फॉर द फिल्म वेलकम टू सज्जनपुर, एंड दिस फिल्म इज नो वे लेस इंपॉर्टेंट देन अदर ग्रेट वर्क ऑफ मिस्टर Benegal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Goswami. You see, Welcome to Sajjanpur has a special place for me in my heart, because it's a kind of it had a certain kind of charm that I loved, and everything worked well. You see, the important thing with films is that even while shooting, it sometimes some films give you a lot of trouble. But Welcome to Sajjanpur was a film which is it's amazing, because we made out a program of shooting for about 40 or 45 days, and eventually the film was shot in 28 days.
Yes.
End of 28 days, it finished the film. Now, so everyone was disappointed that they couldn't go on working. So which meant that it was so efficiently done, and largely because of the actors. The actors were such wonderful actors that the work finished so quickly. It was surprised me no end. It surprised me no end that how we could finish something so quickly. But that can only happen when you have outstanding actors, and of course they work together, not only as a team, but in many ways as a family. You see, the most important thing is that they have to function as a family. Like, how families function. They all know what they have to do. You don't have to tell them that this is what you have to do. And it's not a kind of school. It's a family, really. And the
Correct.
fact is that the unit worked as a family. And that, to me, is the ideal way to work. That is, when you have a film unit that works, you have to work as a family.
जी.
And work as a family, it works. It works well.
जी, और ये दो फिल्में ऐसी हैं, वेलकम टू सज्जनपुर और वेल्डन अब्बा, जहां आपका डायरेक्टर कुछ बदला भी नजर आता है कुछ।
Well, it was just a comedy. It was because many of my films had been very serious, in the sense that they took up subjects that were of great social value and concern. Welcome to Sajjanpur was a much light-hearted film, although it did deal with many of the problems that I normally deal with, about social inequities and so on and so forth. But the fact was that it was a comedy, and it was a light-hearted comedy dealing with the same serious subjects. But the fact was that it was looking at it in a different sort of way, and that's what made the difference. And it was important to do that, because I felt that after a while I was going to become very morbid in the way I was thinking, and only worry about things. So, but I want to see the light-hearted side of things, as it were, and that was important.
और जैसा कि आपने कहा कि लाइटर मोड में तो ये फिल्में हैं, मगर जिस तरह से, जिस सघनता के साथ उन समस्याओं को उठाया गया है, वो अद्भुत है। इला अरुण जी का रोल हो, रवि झांकल जी का रोल हो, या जो मुख्य कलाकार हैं श्रेयस और अमृता, इनके रोल हो, राजेश्वरी के रोल हो, ये बहुत ही खास तरह से पूरी फिल्म की बुनावट हुई है। और रवि झांकल जो आपकी पुरानी फिल्मों में, जुबैदा में और दूसरी अन्य फिल्मों में जो इंस्पेक्टर के रूप में नजर आते हैं, यहाँ ट्रांसजेंडर के रूप में उन्होंने जिस तरह का कमाल किया है श्याम बाबू, वह तो अद्भुत है। और कई जगहों पर जी ऐसे कुछ दृश्य हैं जिनमें उस ट्रांसजेंडर को तंग किया जा रहा है, उसको सुरक्षा चाहिए, वह उस पत्रवाहक के पास जाती है, वो खुद रोने लगती है और तमाम दर्शक भी रोने लगते हैं उसको देखते हुए। तो बड़ा अटैच करती हुई फिल्म है ये दोनों ही फिल्में। ये ह्यूमरस होने के साथ साथ पूरी गंभीरता के साथ अपने विषय को भी उठाती है, चाहे बिल्डर नब्बा में पानी और करप्शन की समस्या हो। जी
So, you see, the subject, one of the problems has been that we have treated transgender people in a terrible way. We have not given, we have either we have treated them as animals in a zoo. We have not given them the necessary dignity that we offer to
Yes.
another human being. And that was very important. According to me, that was very important. And that was the reason for making that film in the first place. Because you see, you have to look at them not as animals in the zoo. You have to look at them as your brothers and sisters. You see, who have as much right as you and me to everything that we have. And there can be no difference like that. And that's important. And I think, I took up that subject largely because of that problem. Now, according to me, I think it worked out well. I was very happy with the way the film was received also.
एक और पक्ष की जो हम बातचीत में शायद भूल न जाए, इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि आपके उस पक्ष को भी ले लिया जाए। आप राज्यसभा में बतौर सांसद रहते हैं और सक्रिय रहते हैं, तो वह एक किसी भी कलाकार के लिए एक बड़ी बात है वहां पे रहना। और तमाम हमारे फिल्म से जुड़े हुए और लोग भी वहां रहे हैं, शमाना भी रही है, रेखा भी रही है, और कई ऐसे लोग रहे हैं। तो उससे जुड़े कुछ अनुभव, अगर कुछ वहां किस तरह का आपका अपना एक पर्यवेक्षण रहा, किस तरह का ऑब्जर्वेशन रहा, या कैसे अनुभव रहे, इस अगर कुछ उसमें से कुछ चीजें साझा करना चाहें।
Well, you see, the most important thing was that to look at the world from the point of view of the parliament. See, most of us we are looking at the world in a very kind of limited way. But from the parliament, you get a view to the entire country. It's a very important view. You can see the problems of the entire country. And it's very important to know, because otherwise our lives are somewhat limited to where we are, limited to our own environments and so forth. But we never see the larger picture. And when you are in the parliament, you automatically are made to look at the larger picture. You are made to look at the entire country. And it's a very important experience to have. Extremely important experience to have. And also to remember the value of the democracy that we have. The value of, when you go to parliament, one thing you realize is the value of your own democracy. The democratic way of life, which is very important. Because everybody there represents a different group of people. So the entire country in a miniature is in the parliament, where each one of them is representing a whole community of people, different communities of people. Now, in my case, of course, I was representing the arts. as a member of the Rajya Sabha. So you get an overall picture in a way that you would never get if you were not in the parliament. And another thing that was very important to me when I was in parliament was the fact that the democratic constitution of ours, which is an unbelievably brilliant document, and how it works. So that is one of the reasons when I was there, I decided that I was going to do something on the Indian constitution itself, because it is an absolutely wonderful document. And Baba Sahib Ambedkar's the full preamble of that document, if you read that, it's just it's fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant. So we have such an outstanding constitution, and we have working parliaments. Our parliaments were working well. I don't know, because sometimes you have lots of walkouts, and so forth. And how it is working now, I cannot tell. But the fact is that when I was there, we used to work. We really worked quite hard. And both you have the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Rajya Sabha, of course, is the Council of States, but Lok Sabha, which is direct representation of the people of the country, is also a very great institution. And I think we should do everything to preserve these wonderful institutions of the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. And it's very important that people who get elected to the parliament must know the constitution of the country, must know what they represent, because for them, the constitution must be like the Bible, like the Bhagavad Gita, like the Quran, because that is for us the most important thing which we have to follow if we wish to remain a democratic country.
जी, यहीं पर एक सवाल और आ रहा है हमारे एक दर्शक का, डॉक्टर रितु पांडे शर्मा जी। वे पूछ रही हैं, सर प्लीज लेट अस नो अबाउट योर व्यूज ऑन टुडेज सिनेरियो ऑफ फिल्म मेकिंग, स्पेसिफिकली ऑन ओटीटी प्लेटफॉर्म। जी,
one of the things, of course, is that you see the cinema itself has changed enormously. Cinema now, today's audience is not necessarily one that goes to a cinema, who goes to a theater to see the films, because everything that you get by way of audiovisual material, entertainment or learning or whatever you wish to say, all of that comes to you directly. It's very easy for all of that to come to you. You don't need now to go to the cinema to see a film, because that film is available to you at all times of the day or night. You just have to either go on Netflix or Amazon or any of these you were taken into a completely different world. You were not part of this world. You went into a darkened room that you were isolated from the rest of the world around you, and you saw this film. So that the world of the film was in many ways a world that was not necessarily connected to your everyday life. But today, that is no longer possible. Today, it's a completely different thing. Today, you have, you can look at a film on your telephone. You can look it on a screen like this in front of me. You can see it in any way you wish to see, and the manner in which films are being shown. Also you have these mini series, different kinds of ways that they offer audiovisual entertainment, everything has changed dramatically to the extent that today it's no longer a larger than life experience. So it's become part of your everyday life. And because it's become part of your everyday life, whatever you produce for that, in order to take you into that magical world is no longer of the same kind. It's completely different. So in other words, we have to start learning everything all over again, how to produce, entertainment that will take you, that will be transformational in many ways.
जी। और एक सवाल हम अपने एक दर्शक का ले रहे हैं, शेफाली चौबे जी का। वे पूछती है आपसे, पॉलिथीन जैसे विकराल आयातित समस्या के लिए क्या कभी कोई फिल्म बनाने का विचार आपके मन में आया? पॉलिथीन और जो प्लास्टिक कचरा जो है जी।
नहीं, मैंने तो कभी सोचा नहीं, but of course it's a very important subject. It's a very important subject because we create so much waste, and the fact is that it can't be recycled. It's not waste that could be recycled. But if you live in a village, for instance, you don't waste so much because everything can get recycled. But if you live with a modern urban life, there is so much that you produce, so much waste that you produce that cannot be recycled. And this is a very serious problem because it's so difficult to deal with this, and I don't think there are easy answers. There are no easy answers except for people to say that, look, whatever you take, whatever packaging you use, whatever you use, do not create waste. Do not create so much waste. So the manner in which you have to create products and services should not create waste. As much as possible, you shouldn't. But to get it, we pay so much attention to the packaging. The product itself may be very little, but the fact is that the packaging is constantly there, and much of that packaging is something that cannot be recycled. It becomes dangerous waste.
जी। इन्हीं का शेफाली चौबे जी का ही एक और प्रश्न है कि वर्तमान सिनेमा के भविष्य को आप किस रूप में देखते हैं? फ्यूचर ऑफ सिनेमा अकॉर्डिंग टू मिस्टर श्याम बेनेगल।
Well, you see, cinema, I've answered that question already. Cinema no longer the way it used to be because the manner in watching a film is changed. And that, in fact, will have a transformative effect on the manner in which we make films also. Because, say 20 years ago, well, there was no such thing as a mini series. There was no such thing as television serials. There were long-running serials, of course, but they used to be on television. But today, all that has changed. And then you have, as I said, since you can access any audiovisual form of entertainment in whatever fashion you want, from a telephone to a small video screen, on to your what you call computer. You can see it on your computer if you want. So all of that is having a tremendous impact on the manner in which you're going to be creating that kind of entertainment. Now, that requires a lot of thinking. That requires a whole lot of thinking because what you are dealing with, you're dealing with things on an absolutely fundamental level. You have to think now, how am I going to do this? I have to learn a new language. In other words, I have to learn a new idiom. I cannot function with the old idioms. Because, there's so many things are changing and changing so rapidly that it's very, very difficult to cope. Even, for filmmakers, it's very difficult to cope. I mean, although we've been making films for many years, but it means that we have to relearn everything. And it's important that you relearn everything because you have to deal with change whether you like it or not.
मित्रों, जब हम श्याम बेनेगल की बात करते हैं तब हम अंकुर, चरणदास चोर, निशांत, मंथन, भूमिका, कोंदूरा, जुनून, कलयुग, आरोहण, मंडी, त्रिकाल, अंतर्नाद, सूरज का सातवां घोड़ा, मम्मू, सरदारी बेगम, सुसमन, द मेकिंग ऑफ द महात्मा, समर, हरी भरी, जुबैदा, नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस, द फॉरगॉटेन हीरो, वेलकम टू सज्जनपुर, वेल डन अब्बा जैसी फिल्मों की बात भी करते हैं। यह जानबूझकर मैंने इस को पढ़ी क्योंकि मेरा सवाल इसी से जुड़ा हुआ है कि इतनी बड़ी रेंज का फिल्म डायरेक्टर, इतनी सारी फिल्मों का फिल्म निर्देशक, जब यह पूछा जाए कि आपके अपने प्रिय और पसंद के फिल्म निर्देशक कौन है देश में और देश के बाहर, तो कृपया उसे भी बताएं। जी।
You will have to say it again. I couldn't follow the last part of what you said.
जी,
I couldn't follow the last part of what you said.
Okay. Who are your favorite directors in India as well as outside India?
Well, there are many, and now, of course, younger directors are infinitely superior to the older ones. Maybe not so much in the choice of their subject, but in terms of making of films, in terms of using the audiovisual media, today's directors are far superior to the directors of my generation. Far superior. There's no question about it. They're outstanding. Their means and methodologies that they use to tell stories are absolutely superb. And, they don't waste any time. They get to the essence of things very quickly. That's because they're so well trained. Because today the language of the audiovisual media is such that they have learned it in a manner that none of us learned. Today it's a completely different world, completely different picture. So younger people today, young people who are filmmakers, they are much superior to the filmmakers of my generation. There's no question about it. They're quite outstanding.
जी। और मित्रों, हम लोग बहुत देर से श्याम बाबू को सुन रहे हैं और जितना सुने उतना कम लगता है। यह जो बातचीत है, दो अवसर है। तो यह कि हम श्याम बाबू के जन्मदिन को हमने एक्सटेंड कर दिया है। 14 से लेकर 31 दिसंबर तक पूरा देश और देश से बाहर के लोग इसको मना रहे हैं। जो आवश्यक भी था, जो हम सब के लिए एक कर्तव्य जैसा भी मैं मानूंगा कि था, और हमने किया। लेकिन जितना भी किया कम ही किया, मैं तो यह कहूंगा। एक तो अवसर यह है, दूसरा अवसर यह है श्याम बाबू कि आज 31 दिसंबर है, हम लोग वर्ष 2021 को विदा करेंगे और नए वर्ष 2022 में आएंगे। इस नया संधि पर, इस मुकाम पर हम आपको सुन रहे हैं, इनलाइटेड हो रहे हैं आपके शब्दों से। आप बहुत देर से बातचीत कर रहे हैं, लेकिन हमने आपके लिए कुछ सरप्राइज रखे हैं। आपके कुछ खास प्रिय लोग अभी आपसे जुड़ेंगे और अपनी बात रखेंगे। मैं सर्वप्रथम इन्हें बुला रहा हूँ और अभिवादन कर रहा हूँ।
Hi, Shyam.
Hi. How are you, Ella? You're well?
I'm fine, sir. I was asked to speak for 1 hour about you. I said, बिल्कुल नहीं. It is a pleasure to listen to my Shyam. मैं आपको सुनूंगी. You have made my 31st, sir. इतना enlightening आपकी बातचीत थी. मुझे लगा मुझे आपने दोबारा वर्कशॉप में डाल लिया. So I told him कि मुझे तो आना ही आना है, and I have to talk to him. And दूसरी बात ये श्याम कि मैंने जिंदगी भर I have kept my patience. You always took my shot when it was sunset. So I said, I will come in the. I said I'll come in the last. But sir, tell me, why did you always choose to take my shot when it was sunset?
Well, I don't remember now, my dear.
No, but sir, it was beautiful because I was telling them that he introduced me in Mandi. और शाम माम अगर मुझे कहेंगे कि सेंटा क्रूज के सिग्नल पे हिला अरुण एक पैर से खड़ी हो जाऊं, I will never ask why. So that is what you meant to me, sir. Or my whole family, whether it is Dhruv, my son-in-law, whether it is Shita, और मैं भी ये जब गिना रहे थे शाम फिल्में, तो मुझे बड़ा अच्छा लगा कि आप तो मुझे खीवा भी ले रहे थे, मैं सुभाष चंद्र जी में भी थी, वेल्डन अब्बा में भी थी, वेलकम टू सज्जनपुर में भी थी. But why did you choose to give me praise with a perpetual pregnant woman in Mandi? सर मेरा तो करियर वहीं रुक जाता. तो सर आप में मुझे में ऐसा क्या लगा कि आपने सोचा कि मैं इसका करियर शुरू होने के पहले ही इसको मोस्ट यूज्ड वुमन बाय थानेदार, इसको प्रेग्नेंट वुमन बनाता हूँ.
Well, because you're a very good actress, my dear. That's why. You're very capable.
Sir.
And whatever you do is believable. That's the most important thing. Whatever role you play, you are believable in that role. And that's why you're given the kind of roles that you've been given in all my films over a period of time.
Whatever you have given, sir, I have been enriched. Let me tell you, आप रेpertoire की बात कर रहे थे, आपने इतना मुझे स्पॉइल करा है कि मुझे कमर्शियल सिनेमा सच में उतना अच्छा लगा ही नहीं. तो बार मंडी में हमने वहाँ पे बंजारा हिल्स में सब लोगों ने साथ रह के करी, जिस तरह नाउ पीपल से यू कुड ट्रेवल विद श्याम बेनेगल इन ट्रेन, why are you asking club class now? I said that the stakes are different. I was dying to be with Shyam Benegal. I wanted to be with him. वो इंसाइक्लोपीडिया है. अभी खाने पे बात कर लीजिए, कपड़े पे इन्होंने रॉन्ग सवाल पूछा. अर्पण वेरी वेल इंटरव्यू, लेट मी टेल यू, आपने बहुत अच्छी बातें करी, पर आपने जब हैदराबाद की बात से he was saying always focus your question. हैदराबाद से आप बॉम्बे आए, he can talk and talk and talk and talk. Any subject, any history, बर्मा से लेके रंगून की यात्रा, सिल्क रूट, मेरी एजुकेशन तो इन्होंने की. चाहे वो ओमपुरी हो, उनको ग्रूम अप करने में, चाहे वो लीला अरुण हो राजस्थान से बिल्कुल भेंजी टाइप, उसको इस मुकाम तक लाने का श्रेय only to my Shyam mom.
Thank you.
So Shyam, yeah, Shyam. But tell me one thing. Today we don't have Shabana with us. We don't have all these my competitors. आप कह दो Ila is the best. वो लोग मजा आएगा श्याम कि सबको पता पड़ जाएगा इतना सनसेट में शॉट देने का क्या मजा है. But I love you, Shyam. I love you and indebted to you all my life. आप देखेंगे बहुत, whenever I talk about you, I have tears in my eyes. You have added so much. I mean, जिंदगी का नजरिया, I mean, outlook you have changed, and I can sit and talk wrong or right on any subject because of you.
Thank you, my dear.
Pleasure, sir, and wish you a very belated happy birthday and very great 2022. साल के आखिरी समय में मुझे ये मौका मिला कि मैं आपसे बात करूं. आई एम श्योर मेरा आने वाला साल बहुत अच्छा होगा and you will again make a film and I'll be there.
Yes,
It has to happen. It has to happen. चाय में नारियल फोड़ूं, but it has to happen. Love you. My wishes to Neera, to your daughter, Pia. सबको मेरा बहुत प्यार.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
थैंक यू नीरा जी, धन्यवाद
Pleasure.
और जी शुक्रिया. और मित्रों, इस कड़ी में एक और सरप्राइज श्याम बाबू आपके लिए. अभी वेलकम टू सज्जनपुर और वेल्डन अब्बा की बात हुई, समर की बात हुई, उन सब के लेखक अशोक मिश्र जी और कुछ फिल्मों में और धारावाहिकों में बतौर अभिनेता भी हम दिखते आए हैं. अशोक जी, आपका स्वागत. और जी
श्याम बाबू को मेरा प्रणाम. और बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है श्याम बाबू को देखकर. इतना कुछ आज फिर हम लोगों ने सुना. वैसे तो मैं 35 साल से श्याम बाबू से सवाल पूछता रहा हूँ और आज तक कभी ये नहीं हुआ कि मुझे किसी भी सवाल का जवाब नहीं मिला. लेकिन 2-3 सवाल है जिनका जवाब मुझे लेना है. जैसे आपको गुस्सा कभी क्यों नहीं आता? मैंने आज तक कभी आपको गुस्सा होते नहीं देखा.
आता है गुस्सा.
कैसे आपने कंट्रोल किया है?
But actually, there is no reason to be angry. There is no reason to be angry. Because when you're with friends, why do you need to be angry?
Yes.
I've never found myself with anybody who was not a friend to me. So I've never needed to be angry.
Right.
You don't be angry when something goes wrong. But in a world where everything goes wrong, why will there be anger?
Right. श्याम बाबू को मैंने ये बात बोली थी पहले, फिर दोहरा रहा हूँ श्याम बाबू के लिए कि हम लोग समर के रिसर्च में गए थे. एक बार हम गांव ढूंढ रहे थे. एक गांव दिखा और पानी की टंकी में मैं ऊपर चढ़ गया, वाटर टैंक के ऊपर. फिर मैंने वहां से चिल्ला के बोला, श्याम बाबू बहुत अच्छा दिख रहा है ये. तो श्याम बाबू बोले मैं भी आता हूँ. और श्याम बाबू भी ऊपर चढ़ गए थे. मैं कभी भूल नहीं सकता इस बात को. इट वॉज वेरी रिस्की. पर श्याम बाबू की लगन देखिए आप कि उस गर्मी के दिन थे, वो नौतपा चल रहा था, श्याम बाबू ऊपर चढ़ गए. एक और एक्सपीरियंस मैं आपको बताऊं समर के दौरान का ही छोटा सा, कि हम लोग इनके इवनिंग में हम लोग मीटिंग करते थे श्याम बाबू के साथ. मीटिंग करके हम चले गए. सवेरे श्याम बाबू ने मुझे एक रुमाल दिया और कहा ये रुमाल तुम कल छोड़ गए थे मेरे कमरे में, मैंने इसको धो के तुमको वापस कर रहा हूँ, क्योंकि सर्दी से भरा हुआ रुमाल था, जुकाम तुमको था लगता है, तो पूरा गंदा रुमाल था ये, जिसको मैं धो के तुमको दे रहा हूँ. तो मैंने कहा श्याम बाबू मुझे बिल्कुल सर्दी नहीं थी, ये किसी और का रुमाल है. पर मुझे बड़ी खुशी हुई कि देखो ये आदमी ने मेरा रुमाल भी साफ किया. कोई ऐसा कर सकता है क्या इस दुनिया में? एक और श्याम बाबू के साथ, मतलब श्याम बाबू तो हमारे वट वृक्ष की तरह से हैं, बरगद हैं हमारे लिए. इनकी छाया में हम लोग पले बड़े हैं. और कलम मेरी रहती है मगर इंक श्याम बाबू हैं. शरीर मेरा है, हाथ मेरे हैं मगर खून श्याम बाबू का दौड़ता है. दिमाग मेरा है मगर विचार श्याम बाबू के रहते हैं, उसपे थॉट श्याम बाबू के रहते हैं. तो जो कुछ भी हमने अचीव किया है वो श्याम बाबू से हमने अचीव किया है. तो मैं अब श्याम बाबू के लिए 4 फिल्में लिखने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ. मैंने उनसे वादा किया है कि आप बंग बंधु जैसी बड़ी फिल्म के बाद 4 छोटी फिल्में बनाएंगे. तो मेरी शुभकामनाएं श्याम बाबू को, और उम्मीद है कि हम लोग अभी 4 फिल्में और बनाएंगे. 4 ही क्यों, 40 भी बना सकते हैं. श्याम बाबू का जुनून और जोश मुझे कभी कम नहीं लगता. तो मेरे लिए मैं उनको शुभकामनाएं दे रहा हूँ कि मेरे उनके साथ काम करने के मैं सपने देखने लग गया हूँ. मुझे रात को सपने आते हैं कि मैं श्याम बाबू के ऑफिस में बैठ के लिख रहा हूँ और श्याम बाबू पूछ रहे हैं और ऐसा कह रहे हैं, ऐसा करो ऐसा करो ऐसा करो. तो जल्दी ये सपना मेरा पूरा होगा, सच्चा होगा. और मैंने एक स्क्रिप्ट उनके लिए लिखी भी हुई है जो बन नहीं पाई बंग बंधु की वजह से. तो शायद वो श्याम बाबू शुरू करें या कोई और. तो मेरी शुभकामनाएं श्याम बाबू, आप खूब हेल्दी रहें. नया साल आपको बहुत मुबारक. और बीते हुए साल में आपने बहुत बड़ा काम किया है. बंग बंधु लोग एज के साथ छोटी फिल्में बनाने लगते हैं। जैसे श्याम बाबू जब जवान थे तो उन्होंने अंकुर जैसी छोटी फिल्म बनाई, लेकिन इस एज में आके श्याम बाबू बंग बंधु जैसी बड़ी फिल्म बना रहे हैं जिसमें 200-250 लोग काम कर रहे हैं। तो ये
1000 से ऊपर,
रिवर्स, हाँ,
ये काफी
1000
बड़ी
से
संख्या में,
काफी बड़ी
काफी
संख्या में
बड़ी।
लोग हैं। हाँ, तो पहली फिल्म में 5-7 लोग थे, दूसरी फिल्म में कोई कह रहा है 250 लोग हैं, कोई कह रहा है 1000 लोग काम कर रहे हैं। तो ये जो आपकी एनर्जी है, ये हम सबों के लिए एनर्जी है, हमारे आप टॉनिक हैं। और मेरे लिए तो श्याम बाबू गूगल सर्च से ज्यादा विश्वसनीय है। मुझे भी अभी भी कोई चीज पूछना होता है तो श्याम बाबू ज्यादा एथेंटिक है जवाब के लिए। गूगल मेरे लिए उतना एथेंटिक नहीं है। इंसाइक्लोपीडिया है श्याम बाबू, सबने ये बात कही है। और मैं सिक्के के बारे में पूछूं तो सिक्के के बारे में बताने लगते हैं, सिगरेट के बारे में पूछें सिगरेट के बारे में बताने लगते हैं। इतना नॉलेजेबल आदमी मैंने तो अपनी लाइफ में नहीं देखा है। और मुझे बड़ी खुशी होती है कि ये नॉलेज हम सबको मिल रहा है। और श्याम बाबू बहुत बड़े डायरेक्टर हैं, दुनिया के 4-5 डायरेक्टर्स में अगर नाम हो तो श्याम बाबू का भी इसमें नाम होगा। मैं उनको शुभकामनाएं देता हूँ कि जल्दी से वो और फिल्में बनाएं। थैंक यू श्याम बाबू, थैंक यू,
Thank you.
थैंक यू अर्पण जी।
शुक्रिया,
Thank you.
शुक्रिया अशोक मिश्र, शुक्रिया जी। श्याम साहब, एक बात मुझे लगता है कि इसकी चर्चा अभी अशोक जी ने की, बंगबंधु फिल्म की। यह एक बड़ा प्रोजेक्ट है और दोनों देशों का जो फिल्म बोर्ड है इसमें इन्वॉल्व है, फिल्म कॉर्पोरेशन और तमाम इधर के भी कलाकार, उधर के भी कलाकार। बांग्लादेश के राष्ट्रपिता शेख मुजीबुर रहमान पर केंद्रित यह फिल्म है जो अंतिम चरण में है और जो बीच में रुक गई थी कोविड के कारण, लेकिन बाद में आपने उसे स्वयं आगे बढ़कर खुद इनिशिएटिव लिया और अभी आप लोग ढाका से लौटे भी हैं, वहां भी शूट करके, और कुछ शूटिंग अब बची हुई है मुंबई। इस फिल्म को लेकर कई लोगों ने बातचीत की यहाँ पर, तमाम लोग, लेकिन हम लोग बतौर फिल्म निर्देशक इस अपकमिंग फिल्म के बारे में आपसे कुछ सुनना चाहेंगे। जी श्याम बाबू।
See, this film, this is I mean, for me, it's certainly a very important film because it's the story of a man who created a nation. It's not an easy story to tell because, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was an extraordinary person. Extraordinary, although he had he didn't get educated abroad or any such thing. But the important thing about him was that, you see, he was he was a person who, I think the most important thing about him was that he believed in what once he believed in something, he continued and never contradicted himself in any which way. It's a very difficult situation for a person to stick by his principles all the way through his life. I mean, in his case, it's like it's like a Greek drama, and he is a kind of hero of a Greek drama, Greek tragedy, or even an Elizabethan tragedy. It's like a Shakespearean tragedy, because he is an extraordinary person who, if he had any faults, it was because he trusted his people too much. He trusted his colleagues too much. So, in other words, he was a hero, man who trusted too much. Basically, he was an extraordinary person and extraordinary capabilities. But he was also part of something that, because you see, his entire family, except for his two daughters, everybody was assassinated. And the fact that, such an enormous tragedy that took place. But when you think of him, I can only think of the fact that he was a man who trusted too much, who loved his people. That's why he's called Bangabandhu, because he was truly not just a friend, but he was really part of the family of Bangladesh. There's a certain kind of honesty about him, which is quite extraordinary. And I think it's been a great privilege shooting a film about him. I'm making a film about him, and it's not complete, of course, because we have one small sequence left to do, which we are shooting at Film City from the beginning of next week, and hopefully we should be ready with this film in the early part of next year. But it is something that I'm looking forward to, and I hope that I can do justice by this extraordinary person whose life we are telling in this film, because he was quite somebody else. I mean, and his life was really, it's one of those strange things that, how the moment I think of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, I think of Shakespeare, I think of Greek drama, because he was that kind of person. He was a person of extraordinary merit, but more than that, I think the manner in which he conducted himself, and the strength and the resilience he showed in his life is something that a lot of people can learn something from. And of course, the fact that all great people in our subcontinent have been assassinated. Mahatma Gandhi being the first, and then you have now Sheikh Mujibur Rahman.
और मित्रों, द मेकिंग ऑफ द महात्मा फिल्म की बात करें, द फॉरगॉटन हीरो की बात करें, या बंगबंधु जो एक टेंटेटिव नाम है फिलहाल, इसकी बात करें, इनमें हम कई देशों के साथ जो श्याम बाबू की फिल्में हैं, जिसमें एक से अधिक देश इन्वॉल्व होते हैं, जुड़ते हैं, आते हैं, उनमें भी यह एक फिल्म जिसे हम शीघ्र ही देखेंगे। बार बार श्याम बाबू इस शो को करते हुए, इस सीरीज को करते हुए, हमने बंगबंधु की चर्चा की और हर बार यह कहा टेंटेटिव नाम है, टेंटेटिव नाम है। कल शर्मा जी से भी बात हो रही थी, तो उससे भी यही बात हुई। हम बोले कि फाइनल नाम क्या होगा, तो शर्मा जी ने भी यही कहा, यह तो श्याम बाबू ही बताएंगे।
Well, at the moment, we still are wondering what we should call the film. But you see, it's like, when you talk about Gandhi, the term for him is Mahatma. When you say Mahatma, you say Mahatma Gandhi. So, when you say Bangabandhu, it's Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So it's very difficult to find out any other title, but perhaps we will look for another title. Let's see how it works. But in any film that I have made, the title has always come at the end. It never started with the title. We always have a working title, but the fact is that we sit and later on we go into a brainstorm and find out what would be the correct title for the film. And it only happens when we see the film. When me and my colleagues and I sit and watch the film, then a title emerges, And most of the films that I have made so far, the titles were not necessarily given by me. The titles were often given by the people who were working with me. It's maybe something like that. But then you see, there is a natural title like Bangabandhu. It's a natural thing. But the fact is, it may not be, many people may not be able to pronounce it outside of India. I mean, outside of the subcontinent, India, Pakistan. They may not be able to pronounce it, particularly in people in Europe and America. So it's a question of we have to decide what to call the film. You know, there are many possibilities, but just now we are using the term Bangladesh while making film.
जी। और आपकी फिल्मों के जितने भी टाइटल्स हैं, जितनी फिल्में हैं, उनके बारे में भी बहुत कुछ कहा जा सकता है। ये टाइटल, वे शीर्षक भी अपने आप में बहुत कुछ कहते हैं, बहुत सोचा समझा शीर्षक वे सभी कहते हैं, जो भी टाइटल्स हैं। निशांत, अंकुर, मतलब काव्यात्मक पोएटिक टाइटल्स है श्याम बाबू।
But
सरप्राइज,
see, the title is very important because it encapsulates in many ways the film. You know, in one word, it's like the seed from which a whole plant is grown. So the title has to be like that. The quality of the title should be like that. You know, and which is what I've always believed. Ankur hai, Nishant hai, Manthan hai, Bhumika vagara. They all had that kind of quality. So that is something, and it's not always easy to get a title like that. Because, you know, it's not, there's a lot to be said for a title.
जी। और सरप्राइज बॉक्स में आज आखिरी सरप्राइज आप हमारे साथ चेतन,
Hi, Chetan. Yeah.
और
Chetan has been my producer in the last 7 films, and I expect I think he's mentioned the subject to me recently, saying that why don't you make a film? So we will probably make my next film will probably be the one that he will be producing.
So I really hope that
चेतन जी, स्वागत आपका। और
you can make 4 films and 40 films as well. So we're always looking forward to working with you on your next film. And I remember when I first met you for Welcome to Sajjanpur, and you said, I have 2 scripts, we can make both of the films together. And I was a bit shocked and taken aback. And I said, 2 films together, so how do you do it? So we just made 1 film. It's been a great memory, a great experience. Arpanji was telling me to talk for half an hour, 1 hour, 45 minutes. I said, I used to meet Shyamji only for 15 minutes every day. And he would go back to his notes and move on to the next meeting. So we are not used to. Yes, I can only keep listening to Shyamji, and that would be a great learning for me as well. So, and the whole beauty about Welcome to Sajjanpur was looking at India from a newer perspective. So many stories within one film, and only Shyamji could possibly say everything in around 2 hours time. Otherwise, it would have taken for hours and hours to say so many stories and on so many topics.
Yeah.
But sir, definitely look forward to the next one, and I'm really excited about that. Wish you all the best, and more than 40 films. Why only 40 films?
Of course. And we'll next time we meet, we'll finalize plans for the film.
Yes. In the coming week, after finish your schedule, I'll come then. Okay, sir. Thank you so much. Wish you a happy New Year. Arpanji, I wish you also a happy New Year. Thank you. Thank you.
थैंक यू, शुक्रिया चेतन जी। जी, और मित्रों, इस तरह से हम लोग आज श्याम बाबू जी के माध्यम से अपनी इस सुबह को, जो मॉर्निंग में जो बातचीत शुरू हुई थी, आफ्टरनून तक आ गई है, और काफी लोग जुड़े, कई प्रश्नों को हमने लिया और कई प्रश्नों को हम नहीं भी ले पाए। जाते जाते कई मित्रों की प्रतिक्रियाएं हैं। श्याम बाबू, पूजा से लिख रही है, श्याम बाबू इज एन इंस्टीट्यूशन इन इटसेल्फ, स्वयं में एक संस्था है, और निश्चय ही भारतीय सिनेमा या हिंदी सिनेमा या जो भी एक साउथ ईस्टर्न सिनेमा कहिए, वह श्याम बाबू के इस कंट्रीब्यूशन से समृद्ध हुआ है। आगे भी समृद्ध होगा। एक के बाद एक और कई फिल्में हम देखेंगे। कल ही शमा जी भी यह चर्चा कर रही थी कि सत्यजीत रे भी बाद में कई और फिल्मों की ओर वे आगे बढ़े एक के बाद एक करके, और आप भी, हमें लगता है कि आपके भी ऑन बोर्ड अभी कई फिल्में होंगी जिसमें आपकी अपनी कलम चलेगी, आपका अपना जादू चलेगा। श्याम बाबू, आपने समय निकाला, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका। और आज फिर हम लोग इस एकाग्र को यही संपन्न करते हैं, और इससे अच्छी कोई और बात नहीं हो सकती थी कि स्वयं श्याम बाबू आप उपस्थित हो और उनकी ही अध्यक्षता में, उनकी ही प्रेसिडेंसी में यह एकाग्र, यह डेडिकेटेड सीरीज समाप्त हुआ। बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया, आपने समय निकाला। और कभी किसी और अवसर पर हम पुनः आपको सुनेंगे। आपका समय कीमती है, हम जानते हैं। आप अभी इस बंगबंधु फिल्म से जुड़े कई कई कार्यों में व्यस्त है, शूटिंग भी शुरू होने वाली है, फिर भी आपने इतना समय निकाला। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आभार।
Thank you.
जी शुक्रिया, शुक्रिया। सभी मित्रों का जो इस कार्यक्रम को देख रहे हैं, जिनकी प्रतिक्रियाएं मिली, हमारे तमाम वक्तागण और काफी लोग जुड़ सके, उन सभी लोगों का धन्यवाद मित्रों, शुक्रिया, नमस्कार।